Hare Krishna. My name is Tapan Mishra Das, and I currently serve as the Executive Director for the Ministry of Education of ISKCON. The Ministry of Education is primarily trying now to ensure that all programs within ISKCON are based upon reading Srila Prabhupada's books. So all educational programs should have a foundation on Srila Prabhupada's books. As part of this week, which is approved by the GBC body, where from the 3rd of September to 9th of September, we'll be focusing all of our energy in various temples and centers where we would like to request devotees to establish the reading of Srila Prabhupada's books every day as a formal commitment at various centers. So in that spirit, we are conducting several interviews with leaders, devotees who are reading Prabhupada's books every day. Today, I have the great fortune to invite to this interview His Grace Sutapa Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Sutapa Prabhu is a zonal supervisor for United Kingdom, Midlands, and South Central. In addition to his responsibilities as zonal supervisor, Sutapa Prabhu is also part of the senior management committee at the Bhaktivedanta Manor, and he heads the School of Bhakti Studies at the Bhaktivedanta Manor. Sutapa Prabhu, welcome to our interview and discussion today.
Hare Krishna, Tapan Mishra Prabhu. It's an honor to be with you, and I feel very privileged to have the opportunity to share something which may be of use to the Vaishnava community. So thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you for agreeing to this interview and this discussion on this very important topic of how Srila Prabhupada's books are the very basis for everything that we do within ISKCON. So let's begin our journey, Sutapa Prabhu. Well, I would like to know from you first, how did your interaction or your first encounter, what was your first encounter with Srila Prabhupada's books?
Yes. Well, I had the great fortune to be coming to Bhaktivedanta Manor from a young age. And so I was coming to the temple, but as you can imagine, it was from a very ritualistic kind of Hindu background, but not so involved. And therefore, I had no interaction with Srila Prabhupada's books. But at age 16, something within me told me that I need to know more about my religion. And somehow, well, we'll say coincidentally, but of course we know there's a bigger plan going on. One of my friends at school, he came in one morning and he said, a Hare Krishna devotee came to my home and he gave me a Bhagavad Gita. And so as soon as he said that, I said, wow, I want to read it. Can you bring it tomorrow? So the very next day he brought in that Gita and then I took the Gita home that day. And I remember it even to this day. It was about 4 p.m. in the afternoon, late afternoon, and I got home and I was looking at the Gita and I was in such awe because I felt as though as soon as I opened this book, all the secrets to life, the universe, everything will be revealed to me. And so I opened the Gita and I began reading Prabhupada's introduction. And after one page, I closed the book and just sat back because all of the wisdom just went completely over my head. It was just so difficult for me as a 16-year-old to grasp. However, although I didn't fully understand it, when I read that first page of Prabhupada's book, something within me told me that there is some profound wisdom here, and I may not understand it, but I have to explore it. And then my journey began, reading, questioning, listening, thinking, and really trying to draw those jewels from Prabhupada's books. And yeah, that was over 25 years ago. So yeah, it's been a journey since then, and we're still learning more.
And who was this fortunate soul who brought you this book?
Well, he was one of my best friends at school, yeah. And we kind of, after I read it, I gave it to him and I said, you should read it. And then we started coming into the temple together, and our first service was to wash the pots. 16 years old, that's what we were doing, and it was a great experience. And unfortunately, I've lost contact with him now, but I'm sure we'll reconnect soon and talk about Prabhupada's books, because that's where our journey began.
Prabhu, clearly it's been 25 fruitful years. What impact has reading Srila Prabhupada's books had on your life?
Yeah, that's a big question, and that could be answered in many ways. I think Prabhupada's books just give me, I guess if I would sum it up in one word, perspective. Prabhupada's books just give me perspective on everything. Perspective in terms of realizing what's important, what's not important. Perspective in terms of understanding how to deal with issues, obstacles, dilemmas, decisions that you have to make. Perspective in the sense of Prabhupada's books really give us the vision to be able to decode life and its events and what we're supposed to learn from everything that we're going through. And therefore, I often think of Prabhupada's books just like, almost like a lens which brings everything into life, into perspective. And so, yeah, they're invaluable. And that's why you can't go a day without reading Prabhupada's books, because that means you're going a day without having perspective. And when you go a day without having perspective, then your journey is susceptible to veering off track. So yeah, perspective is I guess the word I'd use.
Were you really, at the time when you first opened as a 16-year-old, that one page that you read, before that, were you really looking for a perspective in life? Weren't you leading your life with a certain perspective already? So what really happened when that switch went on? Was it your quest to look for something? Or was it that you actually read and it just dawned on you, I'm doing something else. I'm a different person?
Yeah, I guess. I think the first thing, sometimes I liken reading Prabhupada's books to taking a bath in the morning. And when you take a bath in the morning, and well, we're here in the UK and it's a little colder. And if you take a cold bath in the morning, then the very first thing that happens when you take a bath is that you wake up. It's almost like when the water hits your body, you wake up. The second thing that happens when you remain in the shower is that your body starts getting cleansed. And as the water warms up and your bodies become cleansed, it actually becomes quite a relishable experience to stay in the shower and enjoy the shower. And sometimes you could be there 5, 10, 15 minutes. Of course, in the Brahmachari ashram, there's always people telling you to hurry up and get out. But you could stay there for longer. So I think Prabhupada's books are like this. I think the very first experience when you read Prabhupada's books is that they wake you up. It's almost like jolt you out of a certain illusion into another reality. And as years go by, it almost goes to that stage where the books become very purifying. You continue to read them, not necessarily because you're learning new things, but it's just very purifying all the time to engage with Prabhupada's books and see them from different angles of vision and cleanse the heart. And then I think as we get into the mature stages of reading Prabhupada's books, it just becomes such a relishable experience. You open Prabhupada's books with no agenda, with no reason like that, okay, now I need to do this because I need the purification. It's just like you look for that opportunity to just be with Prabhupada and be with all of the acharyas that Prabhupada has really brought to us through his Bhaktivedanta purports. And it becomes a relishable experience. I think like you have these 3 stages of taking a shower, and they're not discrete, but they can be likened to reading Prabhupada's books. So I think, so in answer to your question, I think when I was a 16-year-old and I wasn't looking, but it's almost when I read Prabhupada's books, it almost just woke me up to some, and And then it took me on that trajectory where I realized, yeah, these books are invaluable. They give me perspective, and I need to keep engaging with them.
Well, we hope that everybody gets woken up like you did. But is there something, some background to it? Because we do come across many people that we give a book, we want them to read, they read a few pages, but they still remain disinterested. Was there a specific difference in your life? I mean, you did mention that you were coming to the temple, etc., where in your case you woke up, and then, of course, as you said, the remaining two stages, they sort of naturally flow one into the other, and you're just relishing it. You're relishing the cleansing process. You're waking up, you're cleansing, and then you want to stay there as long as possible, and you don't do it with an agenda. It sort of becomes a habit. In your case, clearly, Prabhu, it's reached that stage of maturity. But how does one get to that stage of maturity? From where you start, a lot of devotees ask this question, that we are not able to, when we read Srila Prabhupada's books, we're not able to keep attention. We're not able to concentrate. We find it too heavy. So could you please break it down for us into smaller stages from your experience of how one matures and reaches to that point where you are today?
Yeah. I guess we could take this question in two parts in terms of how we become receptive to Srila Prabhupada's books. I would say there's a deeper spiritual thing that's going on, and there's also a practical thing that we can do in order to aid the process. On the spiritual level, obviously from our shastras and our acharyas, we understand that every jiva is having a certain level of receptivity. Sometimes we give the analogy of wet firewood and dry firewood. And when that wood comes in contact with a spark, the dry firewood just sets alight, whereas the wet firewood takes a long time. And so what makes someone like dry firewood, that we understand piety from previous lives, Vaishnava Kripa from previous lives, a certain amount of experience in the material world, and basically we all understand that we're on an evolution, and some people are already at that point where they're looking, and they're deeper inside of them, they're searching for something, and therefore they tend to obviously be more receptive. So I think that's something to some extent. Of course, as preachers, we can take note from that, and also realize that preaching is not just about giving books out, but also about doing other activities which will increase people's spiritual receptivity. If we give out prasadam, if they have a good interaction with the devotees, then all of these things increase their spiritual credit in order to absorb what's given in the books. So on a spiritual level, we have to look at receptivity. But then I think the other thing is, on a practical level, we have to, as devotees, as preachers, as individuals who are trying to inspire others to take up this journey into Prabhupada's books, we have to create systems, structures, we have to create resources, and we have to create forums and facilities by which it makes it easier for people to immediately access the wisdom.
And it seems to me that probably that's what is happening at the School of Bhakti, and that was your inspiration to continue to lead that School of Bhakti, to create that second part, practically create an environment, facility, resources to encourage devotees to take a bath every day.
I mean, like Tapan Misha Prabhu, you know as well as I do, we live in an age which is almost like an instant age. Like everything is instant. You get instant coffee, instant, gratification, everything instant.
Instant death.
Instant death. Yeah, everything's instant, and people's attention span has practically been obliterated. People's patience, people's ability to really commit to something and go through a process in order to get what they're supposed to get. that's just declining. And then we face that problem when people come to Prabhupada's books, because they open it and they're almost looking for like, okay, something instant that I'm going to get. And I guess what we try to do at the School of Bhakti and many other initiatives around the world is really take Prabhupada's books and try to present it to people in a way and give them access in a way in which they can immediately see that this is relevant, this is applicable, this is useful, and this is going to be something that is going to make a tangible change to your life. And I think as followers of Srila Prabhupada, we have that responsibility that Prabhupada has given us the textbooks, and now we have to be able to present it to people and give them access in a relevant way according to time, place, circumstance. And that's what we try to do at the School of Bhakti.
And Prabhu, when you encounter devotees or practitioners or newcomers who are not able to read Prabhupada's books regularly, what in your analysis are the reasons for that?
Yeah, we did a whole analysis on this, and I sum it up in an acronym. And maybe later on, I'll share with you why I like acronyms and structures and all that kind of thing. But in an acronym, I would say in order for you to develop the habit of reading, there's 5 things you have to overcome, and the acronym is habit. And these 5 things are the 5 things you have to overcome in order to establish the habit to read every day. H stands for hard. I think some people just find it hard to read, hard to understand the philosophy, hard to register the concepts and the language and so on and so forth. So the books are hard, some people say. A stands for amount. The sheer number of books that are there, just like behind you, there's a bookshelf, and behind me, there's a bookshelf, and there's a lot of books there. And when many people come to the Krishna consciousness movement, many of them never read a book. They were just not into the habit of reading. And therefore, the sheer number of books becomes overwhelming, and individuals just think, I'll never be able to get through all of those books. I don't even know if I want to try. So I think amount. B is a controversial one that some may admit to, some may not admit to, but the reality is that many people read Prabhupada's books and say they get bored. They find them boring. And of course, we know Prabhupada's books are not boring, but why are they experiencing boredom when they're reading? We have to look at that. I stands for inattentiveness, which we've already talked about, that people's attention span is just not there to sit down and read. Take some patience and how to overcome that inattention. And T stands for time, which means people's lifestyles are so busy and we have so many other things we're juggling in life that we just don't have time to read Prabhupada's books, people say. So if you want to establish the habit of reading, you have to overcome these 5 obstacles. And therefore, in our education, maybe I can share with you some book guides that we've produced. These are very much aimed at helping to overcome these obstacles. We make something that's hard easier. We make something that looks so vast more digestible in a bite-sized way. We present something that people may find or may experience as boring, and we show how it's actually the complete opposite. It's the most inspiring thing there can be. We account for people's inattention and therefore create systems where people can be engaged and where they can feel very much involved. And the time one, that when you've done these other 4 things, then people are so inspired to read that the 5th one they sort out themselves, because really it's not a question of not having time, it's a question of not having desire. So when you've done the other 4 and people have the desire, the 5th one they work out themselves. And so that's very much most of what we do.
That's a very good exposition of how to establish a habit by understanding how it is not allowing, the word habit itself, the acronym is not allowing us to form one. Prabhu, I, from a younger age, I, of course, started to work very hard towards getting a good education, worked very hard, and spent inadvertently long amounts of my energy, time, resources, overcome boredom. I tried to avoid inattention and create complete concentration, and took out time for something which I felt was going to give me enormous benefit in my life. So which was my so-called education, my work, etc. And I've observed that as human beings, we don't leave any stone unturned if we find that artha, that merit. And we can see people running around, Prabhupada used to say, day in, day out, people are running out. The famous example, early morning get up, in the Mumbai example, you get on the train and all of that. How do we actually, you referred to this earlier, but all of these 5 things, if one is able to see the goal, how do you bring that benefit in front of someone? One is through experience. One you said is receptivity. Some people can naturally get it, like you got it by reading 1 page. Many of us have to read many. But beside the receptivity, how do you create that ability in somebody to see through the pages and say, this is the best that my life can actually achieve, what's given in the pages? How do you do that?
Sure. Prabhupada explains in his purports that there is the book Bhagavat, and then there is the person Bhagavat. When you see a person in front of you who has assimilated Prabhupada's books, who is living Prabhupada's books, who is breathing it, who is inspired by the philosophy, whose every word is based on Shastra, and who, because of their deep study and deep absorption of these transcendental gems, has become a joyful soul, a person who doesn't experience the difficulties of life because their life is guided by transcendental Divya Gyan. When we see examples of devotees who have taken the books into their hearts and are joyful, clear in their vision and inspired individuals, then others will look at them and say, how did they become like that? Like, how I want to be like that. And what does it take? Well, it was Prabhupada's books. It was Prabhupada's books. Well, then I'll have a piece of that as well. And I think that is really the challenge for the Vaishnav community, that we need more and more devotees who are not just telling people to read, who are not just explaining that this is an important thing, but whose lives are so inspirational, whose lives are so exemplary, whose lives actually show the fruits of what Divya Gyan means in the real world, that people just look at them and say, I want to be like that person. And if it means reading Prabhupada's books, and that's what happens to you when you read Prabhupada's books, then I'll do it. Prabhupada said to Hari Sauri Prabhu, preaching, he said, preaching is an easy business. All you have to do is show people how happy you are. And so, one of my reflections recently, Tapan Mishapu, just to share with you, is that I've been, as a preacher, we go out, we give many classes based on Prabhupada's books. And one of my realizations recently was that I don't want to be a deliverer of packaged philosophy.
I like that phrase.
I would like to be a deliverer of realized philosophy. Because when we hear from someone who is Shabde Pare Chanishnatam, their words are soaked in the vibration of Shastra, and then that is coming out as a natural outpouring, it will naturally inspire others. So we all have that experience. We have certain speakers who we know, we listen to them, and just the vibration of the Shastra makes you want to just get out of that class and get your head into a book. So I think we need those examples.
Well, you are clearly a very inspirational leader yourself in the UK. And I know of many devotees, including myself, who take inspiration from the work that you do. But do you yourself read Srila Prabhupada's books as some would define it systematically? And if yes, how do you do it? Please elaborate. I mean, what is systematic reading?
Sure. I think, and the first thing before I approach this question is what I would like to share with everyone is that everyone has their own technique, everyone has their own personality, and everyone has their own approach and way to mine Srila Prabhupada's books. So I'll just share with you my technique is by no means the standard, but it may trigger something within some of the listeners. The way I approach Prabhupada's books is I find that reading and study are different. Prabhupada did ask the devotee, are you studying my books every day? And the devotee said, yes, Prabhupada, I'm reading every day. Prabhupada said, are you studying the book? Yes, I'm reading every day. No, I didn't say, are you studying?
Yes.
For me, study takes place in layers. And so what I do when I approach Srila Prabhupada's books often, like say, for example, the Bhagavatam, by Krishna's mercy, by the mercy of the Vaishnavas, and by the mercy of being a brahmachari, which does give you time to study Shastra, we've managed to go through the Bhagavatam many times. And we did it in layers. So the first time I read Bhagavatam, I just read through once, familiarity. I think familiarity is the first stage of Prabhupada's books. And then the second stage I go to is after familiarity, I look for flow and structure to understand the landscape. That's kind of broadly the second layer of study. And then the third layer of study is then I go in. So it's almost like this is a broad way in which I study with any Shastra. Familiarity, just try to get a gist of what's going on there. Flow and structure, zoom out and let's see how this all pieces together. And then once we've got that zoom out picture, then go in and find your gems, find your inspiration, and really go deep and absorb and kind of go much deeper into the purports. And
how many times have you read Srimad Bhagavatam?
It would be difficult to quantify it like that because obviously like 2 or 3 times, like start to finish like that. But then many other times, studying a canto here, a passage here, going back and forth.
But that's lovely. 3 times cover to cover.
Yeah, what we do also and which may be another tip, of course, Prabhupada's purports are, Prabhupada actually once said, more important than the verses are my purports.
Yes.
However, one tip I would like to give the devotees is that there is a power in just reading all the verses through. And if you read all the verses of the Bhagavatam through, just the verses, you could do that pretty quickly. And what happens is when you do that a few times and then you read a purport, because you can contextualize that purport in the narrative of what's going on in the Shastra, the purport actually becomes so much more meaningful.
It brings you to the second layer, as you were describing previously. It starts bringing you to the second layer automatically. It's interesting you mentioned this. One of our other speakers also in an interview said the same thing. They were suggested that not ideal, but it's good if you just go through the translations if you don't have enough time to just get that bit of a familiarity. So yes, please share with us. You were, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you were saying that you create that layer of familiarity, then you take a step back and do it again. And this time you're looking at flow and structure. And third is when you go deep. Now, I'd like to ask you, what does it really mean when you jump in deep and what do you really do when you have to deeply absorb yourself in reading of Prabhupada's books? You know, this word deep can be understood by different people in different ways.
Yeah, sure. Tapan Vishapu, before I come to that question, would it be permissible to share something with you on the screen?
Please, go ahead.
What I'd like to share with you, and I hope you can see this now, are 3 books that we put together. And these are available for free download for any Vaishnavas who may find them interesting. But I talked in my little answer there about studying about familiarity and getting a zoom out kind of landscape, if you like, of the Shastra. So what we did is we took Prabhupada's Gita, we took the whole Bhagavatam, we took the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita, and what we tried to do is put together guides which help devotees to immediately understand what is the flow and structure of what is being the transcendental narrations within these books. And so, for example, with the Gita, this is an excerpt from the book. What we did is we took every chapter of the Gita and we gave it an acronym. So, for example, this is chapter 2 of the Gita, and the acronym is Gita. So, in the first bit of chapter 2, we know Arjun surrenders to Krishna. So, that section is G, Guru. Why Arjun surrenders to Krishna, why it's so important to approach someone for answers. When Arjun surrenders to Krishna, Krishna gives him knowledge, and the first knowledge Krishna gives is knowledge of identity. So I stands for identity. And like this, with one word, Gita, you're able to understand what is the theme of the chapter and what's the main contents of the chapter. And when you have that landscape of chapter 2, and then you go into the purports, what you may find is that it becomes a lot more, it jumps out at you and you're able to engage with the purports in a lot more of a deeper way. So this is what we did for the Gita. This is what we did for the Chaitanya Charitamrita. What we did is we came up with 12 words which basically give you the entire flow of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So here on the top layer, you see this is the Adi Leela. The Adi Leela begins with an invocation, and then the next 2 chapters deal with incarnation, how Mahaprabhu advented himself. Then the next 2 chapters deal with Mahaprabhu as a scholar and how he defeated all the Pandits and the Digvijay Pandit and others. And then in the final chapter of the Adi Leela, the word is transformation, because that's where Mahaprabhu, number 1, becomes transformed into a bhakta or a devotee. And then at the end of Adi Leela, he transforms from being a grihastha to a sannyasi. So like this, when you see the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita on one page, and you have 12 words which give you the flow of the entire book, all 9 volumes, all 11,000 verses, then when you open the 15th chapter of the Adi Leela and you read a purport, you can immediately contextualize where I am, what's happened before, what happens after, and it becomes so much more meaningful. So this is what we did for the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And then we did something similar for the Bhagavatam. And in the Bhagavatam, what we did is we not only gave flow and overview, but in each section of the Bhagavatam, we drew on infographics to bring out some of the main points that are described within the Bhagavatam. And so, so I just, before I go into talking about going deep, I just wanted to share this with the devotees that these are completely free of charge. You can download them and you can maybe use the structures, and it may also aid teachers of the Shastra in how to present it, quick overviews to students so that they feel more inspired to go to Prabhupada's books and read the entire thing like that.
Amazing. I think I would encourage everybody who's going to watch this and is watching this now to make use of these study guides, which of course are a reflection of your own absorption in all of these 3 books and your many times reading them, contemplating them. So that's available on tattva.co.uk. So tattva.co.uk, everybody can benefit from these 3 guidebooks, which can facilitate our own personal study and also facilitate those who are acting the role of teachers and conducting classes. Thank you for sharing that, Prabhu. I'm sure many of us will benefit, and especially that it's free and anybody can download it. And it looks very nicely formatted. Infographics, it takes us time to make one. You managed to do it for whole Srimad Bhagavatam. All glories. Thank you for that.
So yes, Prabhu, coming back to your question about going deep and what does it really mean to go deep?
Also, when you answer this question, I want you to share with us, how do you go about contemplating what you've studied? That's so essential. Many of us, we study a lot. As you previously mentioned, you making a change in your perspective now in terms of your preaching, and you said, I want to be now the deliverer of realized knowledge, which essentially means a lot of contemplation, a lot of from absorption to contemplation to then practice. So I request you to now please take us in this journey to the next level, and in your answer also to the next level of contemplation and then practice.
Yes. I don't know how much you're familiar with Christian theology, but they used to, or they had something in the church known as Lectio Divina. And this was a practice of many monastics in the Christian tradition. And Lectio Divina was when they would go into their scriptures and then they would slow down. And then they would go very slow and they would go sentence by sentence, and then they would go word by word, and then almost like sometimes they would stop at a word and then just almost go very deep into a contemplation, into a very much meditation on what that word is, and trying to understand the deeper significance of it. And so this is a very inspiring technique, and you can read more about it. Lectio Divina it's called. And so the first thing I wanted to say is that for me, zooming in and going deep, and I'll explain what I mean by going deep, but that was only possible first for me, at least, when I had overview and I had, so the first thing is I want to say about going deep is that you can't maybe go deep immediately. It's a journey. And the first thing I want to say is I often talk about how we should develop our relationship with Prabhupada's books. And I think when you talk about your connection with Srila Prabhupada's books as a relationship, then I think that's a much more accurate way to look at it. Because in a relationship, you don't go deep immediately, but a relationship goes to deeper and deeper levels of intimacy over years and with sacrifice and with interaction. So I think this is an important point, that let us begin to see our connection with Srila Prabhupada, as Srila Prabhupada's books, as a relationship, and not just as an experience or as a sadhana, but it's actually a relationship that we cultivate. Now, for me, going deep means two things. And I'll explain then what I do practically in my life to do those two things. I think for me, the two words I use to sum up going deep and really mining the jewels from Prabhupada's books, one word is message and the other word is mood. So for me, when I try to go deeper into Prabhupada's books, I'm very much looking for message in terms of what does this mean for my life? What does this mean for the world? What does this mean for the decisions that I'm making at the current point in my, sojourn in this material world? It's very much about taking that knowledge and saying, what does this mean to me? How does this change the way I see things? How does this change the way I vision my life? It's very much about crystallizing a personalized message for you. And the second
would you like to share an example before we move to the second thing of the mood on the message? Can you share an example with us?
Okay, like say for example, we were talking about the second chapter of the Gita and how the first section is G, Guru. And that's where Arjun comes to Krishna and says, Shishyasteham sadhimam tvam prapannam, that I'm a soul surrendered unto you, I'm confused, please instruct me. And in that purport, Prabhupada explains that the material world is a source of complexity. And one must come to the point where they must realize that they cannot solve their problems independently. So you read a purport like that, and that was actually a life-changing purport for me in terms of making commitment towards taking initiation, for example, towards inquiring more confidentially from Vaishnavas and taking guidance. And so when I read that purport and I thought deeply about my life, then what occurred to me when I read that purport is that the reason I'm experiencing so much perplexity, the reason why I don't have clarity, the reason why I still I'm being defeated by the material world, just like Arjun is expressing, is because I haven't come to that point in my own life of opening my heart to the Vaishnavas, just as Arjun opened his heart to Krishna. And when and through that purport, actually, it led me into making a much more concerted effort to build open relationships with Vaishnavas where we were inquiring confidentially. And that was amazing for my spiritual journey, and not just for my spiritual journey, for my emotional well-being. And so I think it's really about reading a purport like that and not just saying, oh, that's interesting, Arjun surrenders to Krishna, and I wonder what's going to happen next. But it's almost looking at it and saying, well, if Arjun is playing the part of the conditioned soul, then that means that I need to start putting my feet in Arjun's shoes and seeing what this means for me, what message is there for me. And we'll see.
So like Prabhupada said, moving from theoretical knowledge to realized knowledge, and that's how you actually imbibe the message. So then what is, you've imbibed the message in your consciousness. I also want to say
personalize. Sorry, I also want to say, to use the word personalize. I think when we see that the words in the Shastra, the words in the Bhaktivedanta purport are personal to me, I think then you begin to see the books differently. They're not just information. They're not treasure houses of amazing Divya Gyan, but it's Krishna speaking to me. It's Prabhupada speaking to me. It's my answers that I'm looking for me. And I think that's an important point.
It is. So then what is the second aspect about the mood?
Yeah, so message is one thing, but mood is another thing. And I think sometimes it's also going deep means to understand what is the mood of these devotees that we're hearing about in the Bhagavatam. What is their spirit? What is their heart? Yes, they're giving these amazing instructions. Yes, they're reacting in all these amazing ways. But what is the mood underpinning all of that? And what does that mean for the way I conduct myself? What does that mean for my own character? What does that mean for my own approach to the world and how I react to things internally? So it's also very much its message, but I think it's also much about mood and absorbing a certain consciousness that is being presented in these pages of Shastra, and then really taking that mood on. The humility of Arjun, the determination of Dhruva, the desperation of Gajendra, the, the amazement of Uddhava, the complete overwhelming amazement when he went to Vrindavan. And it's about taking those emotions or those character traits and very much trying to absorb it and take it so that you become, as far as possible, as determined as Dhruva, as overwhelmed in amazement as Uddhava, as desperate as Gajendra, and really imbibing those qualities.
But it would seem very much, Sutapa Prabhu, that's very difficult to dissect and keep these two separate, because how could one really understand the message if one does not know the mood of
Yes.
where's the message emanating from, and vice versa, so
yeah, for
it
sure.
seems like they weave together, they move together, and one without the other would be incomplete. On this note, I want to take you back a little bit in our conversation when you talked about building this relationship with Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada said that he lives forever through his books. And often a lot of our challenges, etc., that we face individually, institutionally, organizationally, is when we're not able to find our figurehead. We're not able to find our founder Acharya, somebody who keeps us together. So Srila Prabhupada, living through his books and is living forever through his books, how does it manifest in the lives of those who are reading every day? And what does it mean to you? I mean, you touched upon it briefly, but I very much would like to, if I have to sum up and bring this session to a closure, I would like you to share a few reflections on that aspect.
Thank you for this beautiful question. Yes, Srila Prabhupada writes in the beginning of the Bhagavatam that the spiritual master lives forever in his instructions and the follower lives with him. And that is a very profound statement. That is not just a profound statement, but it's a statement which should make us leap into the air with joy, because it means we can be living with Prabhupada every single day. Every day we can come face to face with Prabhupada. And what can be more of a golden opportunity than that? And Prabhupada says, if you follow the instructions. What I'd like to say is that sometimes I look at Prabhupada's life and I almost feel like Krishna directed Prabhupada's life in such a way that there were no more excuses left for us. Like we cannot say, well, I can't do it because I'm too old. Well, Prabhupada came when he was 16.
Yes.
We can't say, I can't do it because I don't have good health. Well, Prabhupada had 2 heart attacks on the ship. We can't say, well, I can't do it because the people around me, I just can't relate to them. Well, Prabhupada came from Calcutta to the Lower East Side. We can't say, well, I can't do it because there's no support around me. Well, Prabhupada came alone with only 40 rupees in his pocket. And
we can also say that I can't do it because I don't have time left in the course of the day. Well, look at Srila Prabhupada. He was doing this in the middle of the night, engaging with the books of his spiritual masters.
Right.
So like
exactly.
that, yes.
And so I just feel like Prabhupada's life, Prabhupada as a personality, is the one who is removing all of our obstacles that ultimately we create in our own mind. And what I feel is that Prabhupada did say, the best of me is in my books. And I feel that Srila Prabhupada is so much present in his books, in the sense that when you read Prabhupada's books, every problem, every dilemma, every confusion, every so-called obstacle that you're facing, everything is removed when you read Prabhupada's books, because it seems as though Prabhupada is just there telling us that there's no excuse. There's no excuse anymore. There's nothing that you need to create to put as a barrier between you and where you want to go. In this sense, I feel Prabhupada is so much present in his books, in the sense that he is there through his books, removing every impediment between us and Krishna. And in that way, we feel Prabhupada's presence so much when we read his books. Unfortunately, nowadays it's good because I'm in lockdown and I haven't had a late night for 6 months, which is great. And not having a late night for 6 months means that we can wake up very early in the morning before Mangalarti and read Prabhupada's books. This morning, I was reading the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the 10th chapter of the Chaitanya Charitamrita before Mangalarti. And when you read at a time like that, and you connect with Prabhupada, then you realize everything comes back into perspective. And maybe that's the point which I'll end on, because that's the point which we begun on, perspective. So this morning, when I read Chaitanya Charitamrita, yes, there are managerial issues going on. Yes, there are personal issues going on. Yes, there are institutional concerns going on. Yes, there are so many things going on in this chaotic world. But at that moment, at 3:30 in the morning, this morning, when I read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it brought everything back into perspective. And just reading Prabhupada's words made me realize there's nothing in between me and Krishna, because just by reading Prabhupada's books and having Prabhupada's association, Prabhupada removed everything. And therefore we keep going back to Prabhupada to reassure ourselves that yes, Prabhupada is there, right there with us through his books, and through his books and his Vani in his books, we live with him. And when we live with him, he removes everything. He removes all the obstacles by his razor sharp words. And therefore, I'll end on a beautiful verse from the Bhagavatam. Tatodu sangamutsrija sadhu satseta buddhiman shanta evasya chindanti manovya sangamuktibi. That the words of a sadhu are razor sharp, and those words, tatodu sangamutsrija sadhu satseja buddhiman shanta evasya chindanti Manovyasangamuktibi. Those razor sharp words of the sadhu cut all of our attachments, cut all of the misgivings within the mind, and render us free to run to Krishna, run to Vrindavan, run to the spiritual world, and run to be in our eternal home. And that's why Prabhupada's books and Prabhupada's words remain our guiding light. So our mission statement in life is read the books, live the books, distribute the books, and then help each other to deeply study the books and relish the books. And if we're able to do that by the mercy of great Vaishnavas like yourself, then we'll consider our life a success. Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Well, you definitely managed to inspire a lot of us in terms of relishing Srila Prabhupada's books in the last 1 hour. And today, with the technology and the books so widely available everywhere, there was a time in our movement where there was one copy somewhere. Devotees were doing photocopies, they were doing Xerox copies and struggling to read what has come out. These books are now widely available through the BBT around the world. All of us can take advantage, and they're available on the internet through Veda Base. We can all read it. And as Prabhu, you just mentioned, every single day, and presumably moving forward in life, for longer hours, 24 hours of the day, we could actually absorb ourselves in this nectar of reading Prabhupada's books. And with that contemplation, free ourselves, cut all attachments, and be free to run back home, back to Godhead. Sutapa Prabhu, I'm ever so grateful for your association. Even more grateful today for sharing with us about Srila Prabhupada's books today. I hope that we will get an opportunity to speak to you again we could talk for hours and hours trying to mine the jewels of your realization in reading Srila Prabhupada's books. So thank you on behalf of all the
Thank you
viewers.
so much. Appreciate the
hope to be in touch
opportunity. My
and again
apologies
talk
for
to
any
you.
mistakes, but I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Prabhuji.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama,